In this interview, I speak with the amazing Leah Judson. We talk about her life and her photography work, which cover over 20 countries and 500,000 miles across the United States of America. We also discuss her refreshing perspective on photography and storytelling and how calling her just a photographer might be inaccurate. This is TWiP. Hey, Leah, welcome to the show. How's it going?
It's going. I'm surviving, which I feel like is most of us. So
we're surviving better now. I think we're surviving better. Hopefully the clouds are parting. Everything's good.
Exactly.
So.
It's starting to feel like that for sure.
No, well, good. Well, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to chat with you. There's a ton of stuff to talk about. I have a feeling we're not going to get through all of this stuff because you have an amazing, most people have an amazing background. You have an amazing back, mid, and foreground.
Oh, I really appreciate that. I do. I'm multi-layered.
There you go. Well, let's talk. So I want to have you set the stage for us. I did a little, in the intro, I will have talked about, kind of setting the stage for this interview. But in your own words, what's the elevator pitch for Leah when you're explaining to people who you are and what you do?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, and something that I've kind of discovered over the past couple of years when defining myself as a photographer, is that photography is not my superpower. And I think that was something that took me a while to actually embrace, and I think might be scary maybe for some people to claim that for themselves, because my photography, I always want it to go beyond just taking a picture of someone and moving on. I want there to be that intimacy, that connection, that just this continuation and this feeling of infinity for that relationship with that person. And I noticed that, I can continue and get stronger as a photographer, or in this new upcoming year, be a filmmaker for this project that I'm putting together. But in the end, I think something that makes me feel really unique and can kind of stand out in the creators world is my ability to really build relationships with people beyond just having them sit for me and take a photo. Yeah. So I think when I think about the work that I'm doing, it really, I don't know, just I feel like I want to be more than just a photographer. And I find that photography sometimes can trap me in this box and make me feel like, my work can never be more important than the image.
Right. And it's so refreshing that you say that, because I believe exactly the same thing. And I think it's trapping yourself and limiting yourself in a lot of ways to say that I'm a photographer. As controversial as that may sound, to say that I am a photographer, because in the end, you're not just a photographer. That's like saying I'm a person that uses a hammer, right? When in reality, you build houses or you do other things, but the hammer is the tool to tell, or in this case, the camera is the tool to tell stories. So you're essentially a storyteller, or that kind of thing. But then, like you're saying, you're also a psychologist as well, because you have to with your subjects, you have to elicit the right response and all that stuff. Was that like a skill that you had natively, or did you have to kind of suss that out to your ability to connect with people?
I sit here and think about all the experiences that I've had as a young person. And I think that that's what's really molded my way and how I show up today, as an adult. And I think I attribute a lot of that to my father, who was in the military. I'm originally from Panama, and my mom ended up meeting my dad there. And a few years later, ended up getting slingshot into the United States. So huge culture shock for me, and adjusting to Pennsylvania from Panama. And, but from there, it just, kind of kept ping-ponging, whether it was other parts of the United States. And then I was overseas in Germany for a while. And I think being able to live overseas at a really young age and have the experience to dive into multiple cultures, because yes, I lived in Germany for a handful of years. But I had access to Italy, to Czech Republic, to Spain, to all these different countries that were just a train ride away. And what sucks is I didn't realize how great I had it as a young person. Yeah. I was very, frustrated that I had to leave all of my friends, and I didn't understand the language at the beginning. And so I saw it more as a punishment than as a gift. And now looking back and seeing the comfort I have when I'm put into different types of communities, or if I'm traveling for work internationally and realizing like, oh, I've been here before. I know how to sit at this table, even though it looks different from this one and this one and this one. And so, when it comes to encouraging people to be interested in travel, just beyond, oh, hey, let's do this Instagrammable experience. But no, like spend time in someone's house, sit down and have dinner with someone that's a stranger that you randomly met at a coffee shop, in God knows what country. That's when you really start developing the skills to be more aware of how you need to hold yourself in different spaces. And, people have different expectations and customs. And I think from that experience, again, coming more into the work that I'm doing as an adult, I realize, oh, I can be this way in this space, or I can be another person in this space. And at the end, it's still me, but I'm at least, self-aware enough to recognize, okay, this is how I can show up here, and how everyone is able to experience me in a way where we all feel comfortable. Yeah. So,
You're a prism, right? Depending on the light that's shining on you, that's with the colors on the other side that come out. I'm really interested. There's so much stuff to talk about. So much stuff. But I'm fascinated how the transition of moving or growing up in Panama and then moving from that space to, I would argue, someplace that's almost polar opposite in a lot of ways to that culture in Washington, D.C. in the United States. I mean, that is from a creed. I'm sure there's a million different facets to that, but from a creative standpoint, how do you think that affected your art overall and the stories you feel like you need to tell, or has it affected it at all?
Well, I think, for one, when I was living in Panama, and mind you, I was really young when I was there, and I've been grateful to be able to visit my family right before the pandemic. And that was 20 years, in terms of a gap. But what I did notice in my experiences and the way that I interact with people and the way that I would create is that I never realized how much I stood out until I got to the United States. In Panama, it was more of, we may look different, whether our skin is darker or lighter, or whether we're wearing something that's native attire, or if we're out in jeans and a long sleeve. I didn't realize how different I was until I got to the United States. And
people told you were different, right?
Exactly. And, I didn't see that I was. I just felt like another person, in my school or in extracurricular activities I was participating in. I never wanted it to be a thing. Yeah. And I mean, hell, even going to the extent of thinking, I don't want to stand out as a woman sometimes in the spaces that I'm working in. When people would come up to me and they're like, how do you feel being a female photographer in this? I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about myself as a woman in this space. I just saw myself as a photographer. Yeah. And so that really did sometimes influence the way that I would enter into a certain project. And it's like, do I want to be a Latina in this space, or do I want to just be me? Do I have to emphasize that I'm from a different country? Sometimes I'm like, am I saying that I'm from Panama because I'm proud to be from Panama, or because I feel like my work might get more attention because I'm not from here? So that's something sometimes that I think could, once in a while maybe influence the way that I work. But creatively, I think sometimes the narrative that I like to explore in some of my work, especially if it's more documentary centered, is looking for people and communities that tend to be overlooked. Even though sometimes I was pointed at being different, I was also really easily forgotten because I didn't fit in. And so it was easier to just opt out. It was easier to just be like, let's continue to be in the spaces that I've already been in before. Mm-hmm. And if she wants to come, she's going to have to work for it. And for me, at a younger age, I was too socially awkward to be able to work that hard to get into those spaces. Yeah, maybe I changed my accent to fit in a little bit more, and I continued to involve myself in different activities to be more American. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I started realizing that I was becoming a bit of a recluse, which also made me extremely observant. And so going back to what you were saying before about how I'm interacting in other spaces and how maybe travel has influenced the way that I've show up in different spaces, I also think that put a lot of, just added another layer to what I was curious about, what I felt really in tune with. And I think being kind of an outcast allowed me to listen better and allowed me to be able to create space with my subjects when I am photographing someone for them to feel comfortable, because I'm like, hey, I know some of the things that you're experiencing because I'm experiencing them every day. And when I'm able to put that playing field out for all of us to be on the same level, then that's when I really feel that my work stands out so uniquely to a lot of other portrait photographers, because there's an intimacy between me and that other person because we were able to make that deeper connection.
Yeah, and it's all about experience too, because it's so interesting when I talk to photographers that travel, that they have that travel bug in their blood and they just have to be going all the time. And a lot of folks that travel like yourselves had their wings clipped over the last year or so,
yes.
So how was that, as a travel photographer, not being able to travel? It's like saying, hey, I'm a pastry chef, and by the way, you can't use batter anymore.
Well, but I think that's the challenges I think that we need, that we tend to, I felt like the past couple of years, I was in this stride of, I'm producing really great work. People are coming and participating in some of these experiences that I'm creating in the city, because prior to the pandemic, I ended up marrying my love for storytelling and people and impact work and photography into a women's organization that was all centered around these events where we'd come together. We'd end up talking about like a stigmatized topic, and I would interview and photograph each woman that was participating. So they had their opportunity to share with the public, like how they felt about the topic. And so I thought, life's good. Planned out the year about doing another conference, all these things. And then boom, COVID happens. And, prior to that, I was traveling in between a lot of those events, but oh man, it was such a weird gift, because it showed me how comfortable I've been. Not comfortable in terms of finances, but comfortable in the sense that I wasn't challenging myself in the type of work that I was doing. And when I was looking at my work while I had so much downtime at the beginning, realized everything started looking the same. And I was like, oh crap. That portrait looks just like that portrait and that portrait, and they're different people, but where's the soul in these? And my work just wasn't dynamic anymore. And I realized I wasn't as dynamic anymore because I was just in the safe zone. So I always thought, I can only do my work internationally. And it finally pushed me to explore, okay, fine, let's look at the United States. What does this place have to offer? Because I'm always kind of sticking my nose up at the US. I'm like, America. Yeah. And so I kicked myself in the butt, and I ended up getting myself a ticket to fly out west and got myself a rental car and kind of did the go find myself trip, did a little hippie move, and just spent a month driving all across where I could, and hiking and camping and being smelly and eating peanut butter in my car. And I finally had that aha moment of, okay, I know what you need to do this year, and it's going to be hard, but if you want to see your work actually go beyond just taking another portrait, you're going to have to make the move now. And I think one thing I noticed too is that I wasn't saying yes to myself anymore. There was this whole big, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I felt like everyone was always advertising, say no, say no. Yeah. If they're asking for this, no. And I'm like, cool. Well, I've been saying no a lot and it doesn't feel empowering anymore. Mm-hmm. And now I was kind of stuck in this moment of I could say yes to myself, and it might be a huge sacrifice and a lot of risk, and who knows what it'll end up turning out to be. Or I can say no again and play it safe and wait till everything opens back up, and then I just continue to do what I was doing beforehand.
Yeah, and a lot of photographers, I think they're listening to this, maybe sitting in their cubicle or, on their way to their cubicle in traffic, or on a weekend, figuring out what they're going to do in their cubicle when Monday rolls around. A lot of people dream about that life, or being able to have that aha moment, or being able to break away and have that let me find myself artistically moment. Like for you, COVID was a catalyst to that. But for what would be your advice to people that are stuck? Hey, I'm making good money. I'm at this job. I got a mortgage. I got bills. I got this. I got child care and a car payment and all this stuff going on. But yet, just over the horizon, I listen to these podcasts that Frederick's putting out. I hear Leah talking about just throwing caution to the wind and eating peanut butter, out of her car. And it sounds amazing, just to have a month to be able to unplug from your reality to find out who you're, like your own personal control, alt delete. Like, what advice would you give people that are wanting to move in that direction, but can't necessarily go full Monty on it?
Yeah. Burn the list. I mean, we can easily, I feel like humans are really great at making to-do lists and excuses lists. And I mean, I was definitely one of those people too, that would go, oh, well, I just don't have the money. I don't have the time. I mean, I have a husband. I need to be available for him. I have a dog. I got to find somewhere to drop him off while I go do the thing. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there are people with kids, which makes it harder. I can't, speak for people who have to juggle little humans, but I think at the end of the day, there's always going to be something for us to say, I'll just wait till this thing gets done. Yeah. There's always stuff to do. And you, as difficult as it is, you have to make that conscious decision of, okay, now, because otherwise it will always be later. And
sometimes later never comes, right?
Sometimes later never comes. And I mean, to be honest, it wasn't a good time. It wasn't a good time for me to say yes in that moment, to take the trip with the peanut butter and all the things. But I realized that if I didn't do it in that moment, I was either never going to do it, or there wasn't going to be the same energy behind it. And I didn't go on this trip thinking I was going to have an aha moment. And I call it the go find yourself trip thing as a joke, because I didn't realize that moment for me until after the trip. I just needed to escape out of DC. I just couldn't handle not being able to go out. And so for me, I thought, okay, the safest way I can travel right now during COVID is to be in my own little tiny tin on wheels, be contained in my own germs.
Your little mobile quarantine unit. Right?
Exactly. And majority of the places, all the national parks were eerily empty. And I would occasionally meet people, and it was phenomenal. Freaking phenomenal to be like, oh my God, there's humans here. Yes. Okay. And the moments that I ended up having with these people randomly were the perfect, they needed to be there. in order for that memory to happen and for it to stick with me forever. From, breaking down somewhere to freaking out about bears and whatever it was, there was always someone that was there to kind of help me get to the next step. And it was just that reminder of how important community is, but how important, I know it sounds so cheesy, but just being kind to other people.
It's true.
Because when you put that energy out, people are so willing to give their time, and there doesn't have to be any type of dollar signs connected to it. Yeah. And gosh, yeah. Anyways, I can go on a million.
But this is great. Like this trip, though, a lot of photographers will say, yeah, perfect. I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to find company A to sponsor me, and I'm going to make Instagram stories while I'm on the road, and I'm going to create a portfolio of images from this spot, that spot. And it's all about it's that list, right? It's that to-do list versus the, I don't care. I'm just going, hey, that looks like a good road to turn left on.
Yeah, no, you have to strip all the things that are your everyday go-tos. I barely had anything. I mean, I barely had room in the car, so there wasn't so much I could end up getting. I'm a portrait photographer, and I put myself in a position where I had to learn a new way to shoot, which was nature environment stuff. Mm-hmm. So in terms of how I was getting in my head, it was more of like, how the hell do I chase light? I don't know why I keep missing the sunsets. How do I take a picture of the sunset? And it was really nice to challenge myself. And I was so focused on trying to figure that out that thinking about the phone, thinking about trying to share my experience was in the back of my head. Yeah. I wanted to purposely put myself in a space where I barely had connection. I mean, majority of the spaces I was in didn't have Wi-Fi, which was sometimes excruciating because I would be really excited about something. I'm like, I'd love to share with somebody. But I think that's when you have your best ideas, is when you're either super bored out of your mind or that there's nothing to echo feedback. Like you're not searching through Instagram or some of these other platforms to compare your work or to sit here and go, okay, well, how can I shoot like that? It's purely yourself existing in that space and taking it for what it was. And some days were crap. Like some days I was so sad about the one photo I got. Then there were other days that I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I had several more hours to just spend in that moment and keep taking the photos that I was taking. That trip allowed me to finally print my work. I've been, doing photography professionally for probably 10 or so years now, and I've never put my work on the walls. And it was the one trip that I was able to have printed, framed, finally hung it a couple weeks ago. And all I do is sit and stare at it during dinner. And I was like, wow, I was only able to create that work when I finally disconnected and didn't sit here and try and come up with my Pinterest board of inspo on how to take a picture of a rock or whatever. It was just, it was the memory for what it was. And it was special. And I want so all of my work to resemble that.
And that is really interesting because as I think you're experiencing, right? When you print something, it takes on a different life versus just digital pixels. And it sounds like those experiences, or some of the experiences and memories that were present and feelings that were present when you created the work that you look at when you're having dinner, are there, right? They're tied into that print. Mm-hmm. And when you look at it, you get a little whiff of what that was like. So it transports, it's a time machine, right? Photos are time machines. It takes you back to that moment for a quick second while you look at it. And then now you're back in reality again. So that is really interesting. So, while you're this trip, well, first of all, I want to go back to the trip and talk about that a little bit, but I want to talk about BEHOLD.HER and that initiative. You kind of touched on that a little bit before. Let's go a little bit deeper on that. What is it?
Oh, deeper?
BEHOLD.HER. What is it? Let's dive in.
Yes, Beholder. Oh my goodness. I mean, when I moved
Beholder,
to DC,
duh. I'm saying it wrong. Beholder.
Oh no. Well, the dot is important because you can type it in without the dot and you'll get something completely different. So, right. So I appreciate the emphasis. Good. But man, that project was a cry for friendship. When I first moved to DC, didn't know anybody, was trying to figure out who my clientele was going to build out to be. And honestly terrified of women. So I was like, cool, let's combine all of these three things and figure out what the heck's going to happen. Originally, I was just sharing some studio space with local graphic designers in the area and ended up getting some lighting equipment that I wanted to test out because I'd never shot on strobe at the time. I was the natural light photographer.
Yeah.
And so, AKA, I was really scared to use strobes and didn't know how to use them. Yeah, exactly. So I had a lovely friend of mine, Joe, who taught me how to use strobes. So I had the opportunity to bring them in, brought a couple of women in to test that. And I realized that the space that I created, because I was purposeful with making sure that those who came to be a part of this test shoot didn't know each other. And from there, I started seeing how conversations were unraveling. And by the end of the evening, people are in tears and hugging each other, and like the exchange of stories and the curiosities that people had in that space of like, where are you from? And you know, what do you believe in? And one of the women, when we're all kind of wrapping up, she's like, are you going to do this again? I'm like, oh, is this a thing? I was just, okay. And so I started thinking, okay, well, what does doing this again look like? And I ignored it for a couple of weeks. I get a phone call from this woman. She's like, oh, I saw your portrait series. Because when I ended up putting the pictures online, I wrote something about each one of those women, something that I heard about their story or something that I admired about them. And this woman was asking me, hey, I would love to hire you for your series. Can we do some type of collaboration with my brand and your brand? I'd love to hear the stories of these women that come to the table. I'm like, okay. So AKA, I'm like, oh yeah, totally doing this for so long, blah, blah, blah. Give me like a week and I'll send you materials and an outline. Another AKA of, let me figure out what the heck I'm going to call this thing. I got to find some branding colors, got to make a PDF, got to make it look official. And so from there was just magic. I mean, there was definitely a year where I felt I was overextending myself and creating these events because each event was new. I didn't know what it was yet. It was testing it, and sometimes it failed, sometimes it worked really well. But again, it was just this, I would collaborate with different restaurants, different spaces here in DC, pick a topic. I mean, from eating disorders to having conversations around the societal pressures of being the perfect mother. I mean, we were covering everything.
Wow.
And I would limit it to about 12 women because I wanted it to be more than just a conversation. It went back again to building relationships. And then also my fear of female relationships, I also know that tends to be present with other women as well. So I wanted to figure out, how can we pull back this layer and make this environment less intimidating? That means less people, an opportunity for everyone to be able to speak, to share. The spaces were really small and intimate, so you couldn't hide. You're also not allowed to use your phone, and you're not allowed to share what you do or who you work for. So specifically here in the city, that means, hey, I took off that whole layer of identity for me because in DC, it's all about what you do.
Right.
And so a lot of the women who would come and participate really struggled with that because they didn't know what they loved doing outside of work. They didn't know who they were outside of work. So there was, boom, challenge one. Then you have the introverts. Now they're like, oh, crap, I don't have my self-defense mechanism, which is my phone. I want to sit here in the corner and pretend I'm texting or something's important till the event starts, and then maybe I'll participate. So taking those two things out of the picture really, really made people have to sink in and be present. Wow. So these events would probably be about 3 hours long. And in the middle of those events, that's when I mentioned earlier, I have a backdrop set up, my lights, everything. I would just kind of put my hand on someone's shoulder, tell them to walk over, and then I would start to interview them privately, take their portrait, and then we just kept rotating the women out throughout the entire night quietly. And at the end of that, I just had this archive of faces and voices. At the beginning, it wasn't voices. This was something I learned afterwards when I couldn't read my chicken scratch and poorly transcribed some of the things that these women would say. But simultaneously, I had people making assumptions about where these people were from. And I was like, oh no. They're like, oh, just another white woman, blonde hair, blue eyes. I'm like, she's actually 100% Mexican. She just happens to look like that. And so like, I wanted people to hear their accents. I wanted people to hear the moments where they were choking up and crying and getting emotional about the conversation. And so I wanted to add that layer where people felt like it was a lot more intimate and that they were having that conversation with that person. So needless to say, things grew really quickly. 4 years passed with doing, this series. I only thought it was going to be, a one-time little pop-up. It went to happy hours, to podcast listening club, to like hosting one of the first conferences here in DC last year before the pandemic. And it's just been freaking incredible.
That's crazy.
But yeah.
Yeah.
So,
it's there's so much to unpack there. One thing is, I had no idea women were afraid of other women. Like I had no idea.
Is that?
I thought only men were afraid of women. Women are also afraid.
Oh my God, no. For sure. What? No, you had to know just a little bit. Just a little bit.
I thought, I didn't know it was fear. I thought it was more rivalry,
It's both. I'd say it's everything. Every feeling that a human can experience, that's what we feel about towards other women. Just jealousy, but excitement and like support, but also want to tear you down. Yeah, all the things.
I'm just brand new. Okay, I want to switch gears and talk about Before We Could Drink.
Oh,
so
okay.
That's that I was reading because I was reading your short bio here. That sounds kind of amazing and kind of terrifying. Tell us.
Let's talk about the fear.
Yeah, let's unpack our fears here. Let's talk about that Before We Could Drink.
So Behold, in essence, is that foundation for Before We Could Drink. So insert pandemic. Leah's crying in a corner. She's like, what am I supposed to do with my life? She goes, takes her peanut butter trip, comes back and goes, wait a second. Okay, still want to do storytelling. Still want that level of intimacy. Can't really have it in an event scenario. But what are some elements that I can pull from this and build a whole different series? And so that's kind of when Before We Could Drink started surfacing. Now, a little bit of a quick backstory. My first degree was focused on working with children with disabilities through art therapy. So in terms of who my subject is for Before We Could Drink, which is all youth under 21, big part of my interest in young people, there's definitely bias there. So I don't have kids of my own, but I absolutely adore young people. I feel that we have the tendency of kind of pushing them off to the side, going back to that overlooked voice, that overlooked part of our communities, because, and maybe you've experienced, I feel like a lot of people have, it depends on what culture you kind of grew up in, what community you were in, but most people are told you can't do something because you're not old enough, or because you don't understand something because you don't have enough experience in it.
Right.
And I really wanted to dig into that narrative because even for me as an adult, I still have people question that I'm running my own business because I am younger. Or I look young. Thank you. Genes, mom.
You do.
And I got baby face. And so because of that, then, it starts making me feel nervous to show up in certain spaces. I feel like, oh man, people don't believe I can do this well. And so that combination of, again, storytelling and thinking about a demographic that I feel I might be able to support in a different way, I just kind of dove headfirst and came up with this silly idea of combining that trip, that travel of, okay, well, I was in this rental car for a month. Maybe I can be in a van for a couple of months, but then van became a bus, and now I have the bus, and now I'm like, what am I doing with this bus? And currently I'm trying to convert it into my mobile studio. This isn't a new thing. A lot of people this past year definitely jumped on the bandwagon of converting a van or a bus into their little RV. Mm-hmm. But for me, I want to use it purposely for the documentary as a means of getting from one character to the next. So Before We Could Drink in terms of the title, is meant to play on this idea of, okay, like give me as a young person some credit that I can get something done. And you're like, society claims that when you turn 21, you're an adult, or maybe 18 for some people. It depends on like whether or not you're 18 and older to call a 1-800 number, or 21 and over to be able to drink alcohol. But that's when you finally get past the torch of like, welcome into adulthood. Yes. But then I see these kids and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that person can invent like the next rocket that needs to go out to space. Or here's some kid who's lugging this big, giant, God knows what out of the ocean, and I can barely open like a jar of pickles. So there's just this impressiveness. I'm just so bewildered sometimes with the way that we treat younger people and how we doubt their ability to be able to do something incredible. And so that's what this whole series is going to focus on. It's going to be about 6 to 8 people that I'm going to choose for this project. I'm keeping it small because I have no idea if this bus is going to explode while I'm on the road. So I want to leave enough room for me. I know, right? I want to leave enough room for me to be able to get from point A to point B. And if there's an issue, we can address it hopefully within that week or 2 weeks that I have to get to the next location. But I'm going to make a full circle around the United States. I'm going to start here in DC. I have a story in Maine, and then I'm going to drive straight across to Montana for my next story. California, there's a New Mexico, Phoenix story that kind of overlaps. Louisiana, Florida, I mean, everywhere. The middle's kind of not really getting a lot of attention. I'm going to try and zigzag if it makes sense. I know. So, I mean, I'm tacking on a good 10,000 miles for this, and the bus is about 20 years old. So just kind of crossing my fingers that guy's going to chug along. But
it'll make it.
My weekends are spent, with my husband trying to build everything out, learning how to be a carpenter as much as I can.
It's
but
like
simultaneously, oh my God, it's Tiny Home.
Tiny Home meets American Vacation.
It's so crazy. I mean, it's probably, my days start at 5 a.m. and end anywhere between 8 and 9 p.m. almost every day. Because if I'm not working on the bus, I'm story finding. If I'm not story finding, I'm contacting, people that could be sponsors. And I've never done that before. I usually tend to, kind of keep quiet and just do my thing. But this is a really expensive venture. And I want to also be able to provide support for each one of these kids. I don't want to just come in and, have them tell their story and be like, all right, see ya. I want to make sure provide impact. And in this moment, impact is, providing them with a scholarship. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, and it's super exciting, super exhausting, but it's the first time in a while where, again, I feel like, okay, my work is giving me impact. Yeah. My work is able to potentially transform lives, and maybe shift someone's narrative about how we're interacting with certain types of people. So I'm really excited to really free and do that.
I'm really curious about your power source, right? What is your power source that drives all this? Like some sort of like
I thought you meant what's charging my gear. I'm like, so we had to buy multiple batteries.
No, yours.
Power source. Okay.
Yours. Like, are you powered by nuclear energy, dilithium crystals? Like, what is powering Leah?
Honestly, I eat a lot of hot dogs. You can ask people.
So health food. Okay.
Yeah, no. I really do love hot dogs. It's a thing. People get weirded out about it, but no. Oh my God. That's funny. I feel like that's probably the first question I really don't know how to answer. Energy. Yeah. I mean, I am a very introverted person. So when we get off of this, I'm probably going to take a nap. Like, people drain me, but at the same time, I know I'm pouring. Just at the same time, people give me energy, and I think I get so excited about. Sometimes I feel like when I have these experiences when I'm documenting other people, that I walk away feeling like I just watched a TED Talk, and I'm that annoying person in the room where I'm like, did you know? Like, I just love having that opportunity to come to the table and be like, did you know that this person is doing this thing? And it's so, it gets me so excited for the next thing, to continue learning. I think learning from other people is what continues to fuel me to just keep going and keep creating. And I hope that, other photographers or other people who are in the media world can find something in their work that gives them that type of energy. I think I didn't have this energy to do this type of work years ago because I didn't find the thing that actually really excited me. I just kept doing work to pay the bills. And this is definitely not going to pay any bills, but it is going to be the most fulfilling thing that I think I have done so far in my career as a photographer in comparison to everything else. Because I know that, again, it goes back to impact. I know that, I'm going to be creating an opportunity for a lot of these people who are going to be a part of this to speak for themselves in a way that they might have never been able to before. And I'm really excited that it's going to be me. I'm able to give them that platform to be like, go for it. I will capture you as honestly as I can. And we're going to be collaborators on this. It's not me telling your story. It's you telling your story. I'm just here going back to that tool, being that tool for them. And just being a little bit of a guide, and
you hit on the head. Just the and I jokingly, or tongue in cheek was talking about your power source. What is your power source? And it's the thing that drives you, I think. And the tragedy, I think, is a lot of people haven't found that thing that drives them. So they're in that, I'm just doing this thing to pay that person for this thing that I have to, they're in that, right? I
feel like people do know what drives them. People are just afraid to actually accept what it is and to move forward with it. It goes back to that safety thing. And you don't need, it goes back to what can you tell people to go do their, their peanut butter trip? And it's like, it goes back to those excuses. There is that little fire that's always in there in someone that recognizes, oh, this is a thing that would make me super happy, super fulfilled, excited to wake up and do my job. But I have my list. But I have these expectations. I have these boxes that people are placing me in, and I don't want to disappoint them. And I think we get so sucked into needing to please other people that we have no idea how to go make a choice for ourselves.
Yeah. Ugh. We have to do it. There's a book title that came out of this discussion, I think, for you. And I think you need to write a book called My Stinky Peanut Butter Trip. That's
how
it.
Hot dogs fueled. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, exactly. That's the subtitle. How hot dogs fueled my transformation.
Amazing. I'd read it.
I love it. Let's end with gear. People on This Week in Photo always want to know about the gear and the different tools that you're using to do what you do. What's in your kit? What do you take with you on these adventures?
Well, the kit has changed recently. Big part of it because before we could drink, I am in collaboration with Fujifilm. And prior to that, I was a Sony shooter. Temporarily, that was also new. I was always Canon up until about a couple years ago. And then I got onto that Sony A7 III bandwagon for a little bit.
Yep.
And when Fujifilm came in, I was a hell yes, because their community is just freaking mind-blowing. The way that they support people beyond, looking at equipment stuff. I mean, just going in terms in the direction of intentionality behind the stories that they're telling. I was like, yes, I'm with you guys. But I've never touched a Fuji camera besides my little Instax. So I was very weary about, okay, how is my work going to transform when I start using this equipment? And I am working on the Fujifilm X-T4 along with their GFX 100S. And oh my God.
That's the one with the little tiny sensor, right?
Yes, the tiny sensor that somehow doesn't make your entire computer shut down. Oh my gosh. Well, I'll start with the XT4. The XT4 I was actually kind of really frustrated with it at the beginning. I didn't understand the color profile stuff in it because they had all these different like picture profiles for it that's meant to, replicate film. So I was like, oh, what's my vibe? I don't know how to coordinate that. It's also my main film camera that I'm going to be doing the documentary on. So I had to figure out the video, specs with it and also get comfortable with navigating, having, using it for dual purposes. And so it took me maybe about a month or two to finally get a hang of it. And I feel like my work is just, there's so much more intentionality behind it in the way that I'm shooting. And I think a part of it is because it's making me slow down. It's not the way that the dials are fixated on the top, they're meant to, again, replicate film camera and stuff. I just feel like I'm there. I'm like, all right, I know it's digital.
You're connected.
Yeah, I know it's digital, but I'm like, I only got so many shots, and I'm taking my time with it. The GFX, oh my God. I feel like I can touch people's skin. Like when the picture comes up, I'm just like, how? It's just so beautiful. And as a portrait photographer, I'm just like I can't. I feel like I've been really able to reach through my computer to touch some of the people that I end up photographing with their consent, of course. And
yeah, exactly.
But damn, yeah, those files are huge.
Is it color? What's the magic in it? Is it the color? Is it the quality of the color? Is the resolution?
I would definitely say I would definitely say it's both the color. Like I feel like skin tones are magic in comparison to the Sony. Oh my God, Sony. When I would put those files next to each other, I'm like, what was I thinking? Shooting on my A7 III, the skin was just kind of, but, it just felt green all the time. And yeah, you can fix that stuff in post, but. There was always something kind of missing, and I felt like my A7 III was my quick shooter thing. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll take it out because I can trust, at least keep something in focus and move on. But I abused that piece of equipment for sure. With the GFX, that thing is definitely an elephant, and it also super like. All right, let's take our time here. Because there would be moments where I'm like, I'd love to see this photo. And I'm like, all right, you can think a little bit. Go for it. Take your time. And
little elves in there running their cranks.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so so that was a little bit of a learning curve, though, too, with figuring out, okay, do I really need to be shooting this large of a file? No. So, I'll dink down to some of the smaller shooting files. But yeah, putting it in Photoshop or Lightroom, I'm just like, how is the skin like? And I mean, the texture, it's real. I'm like, I see all your pores, and I love it. I love the pores. I've found that some of the other photos when I'd bring up, it already felt kind of flat to me, and I even love the way that the shutter sounds like, that it's just this nice little, I've had other photographers that have been shooting with me or around me, or I let them, test out the camera, and they're like, oh my God, is that what that sounds like? I'm like, yeah, that's what it sounds like. It's like little butterflies just purring at you. Like it's just this hybrid between a butterfly and a cat. And I'm just like, it's amazing. So the whole experience.
Butterfly, a cat, and a warm latte, a little hot chocolate.
Yes, it's all your comforts just in one. It's been fantastic. I was skeptical at the beginning, and I'm always want to be super honest about, the gear that I'm working with. And they won me over, absolutely in love. I know there's some people, we're all going to be married to our equipment. And that's the one thing for me, even when we look at gaming consoles, right? You have the Xbox and the PS2, PS3, whatever PlayStation it's on now. Everyone's like, I'm married to my side. But for me, I'm like, I am willing to explore all the different things and figure out what makes sense for my type of work and how my workflow is. So,
back to that hammer, right? XT4, you're not married to the hammer. You're married to the work, not the hammer, and you're going to use whatever hammers your nail the best. And
exactly.
Is the right weight for your hand.
Yeah. So the XT4 has the 16 to 80 millimeter 4.0, and then the GFX is on their 35 millimeter. And just kind of sticking with those. I have other ones that are, I think the GFX has like a 80 millimeter equivalent. I haven't used it too much. And the XT4 has a 50 millimeter equivalent. And that one I use occasionally. I used to be gung-ho on always sticking to 50 millimeters anytime I'm doing portraiture. But I think just in the nature of the type of documentary work that I'm involved in this year for the Before We Could Drink project, it's really nice to have, actually their kit lens is just impressive in terms of how well it works. So just able to go. Toys and tools.
Toys and tools. All right. I want to wrap up with a rapid fire question round. Are you ready for this? So
no, I'm nervous.
This stream of consciousness, what pops into your head. Is
it a one-word answer? Am I like hot dogs, American flag,
It totally could be. Totally could be. It's up to you. There are no rules, except there are no rules. So
okay. Perfect. Okay.
All right. The first question is favorite food.
Oh my God. Well, hot dogs.
Hot dogs. Yeah, we already knew that. Like just raw hot dogs. Like no,
not raw hot dogs.
Like onions or ketchup or anything.
I will say I'm basic. I can just have the bun, the hot dog, and the ketchup. I'm good to go. I'll be happy. I'll eat the 6-pack. But it can even be the boiled water hot dogs. Totally fine with it. Wow. If it's a grilled hot dog, amazing. I'm definitely one of those people who are on this. Oh my gosh, Home Depot, they do this thing once a year where they give like hot dogs out to all of their customers and stuff. Every time. I'm always figuring out how can I get more. I don't want to be the person that's just like, can I have 5 free hot dogs, please? If hot dogs are not readily available, it's definitely rice or pizza. I know those are random.
Got it. Your husband saved a lot of money on those dates. Didn't
my God, yeah. I'm so cheap.
Cheap. No 5-star restaurant. Let's go find the best hot dogs around. Yes. Okay, next question. Favorite lens. Like your desert island lens. You're stuck on a desert island. The cruise ship's not going to pick you up for a month. What lens do you want to have with you if you could only take one?
I really loved, and granted I can't have it on the bodies that I have now, my 50 millimeter Sigma art lens. I think it's series 2. I love it.
Do I have that lens? I might have that lens.
I do. Sigma does really great lenses.
Yeah.
So that, I'd say for sure. However, I've been really enjoying a 35 millimeter. Same thing, 1.6. It gives me that ability to, like, if I want to do a portrait, I can. I got to be mindful about it because I don't want people to look kind of weird.
Right.
But if I need that extra space, because if I'm in a tight room or, I don't have the ability to scoot back a million feet. It just gives me that extra width that I need to really bring in my environment. And
And on a desert island, you might need that, you want to show where you are.
You want the palm trees. Yeah, exactly. Those little boats.
All right. I got 2 more. Favorite location. You've traveled, 500,000 miles?
Australia.
Oh, really? Australia?
I know. And it's so funny. I listened to, I think it's Chris D'Elia as a comedian. And he makes this comment about, he's like, Australia is okay. I'm like, fine, whatever. I loved Australia because it was just, the people there are incredible. They're funny. They pick on Americans a lot and I can take it and it's amazing. They're so hospitable. I can't even say that word. The only place that I will say yes to a random invitation to come to someone's house without feeling like I'm going to be stolen and thrown on a ship somewhere. Like the only place that someone was like, hey, do you want to come over to our place for a barbecue? First time I ever met them, I'm like, yes, I'll be there right after work, gonna go for it. And I never saw them again and it was fine. Like it was cool. Amazing for that experience. So the creatures that are there, everyone says like, oh, there's all these scary animals, but I barely saw a thing. So I love it.
Good.
Freaking love it.
Have you been to New Zealand?
I haven't. No. I know I'm going to love it more.
I love New Zealand. New Zealand, Middle Earth, aka.
Well,
right?
and I know New Zealand's going to be fantastic because Australia copies New Zealand for like everything. So,
you're gonna get some hate mail for that.
I know. And when you always see it though on the news, they're just like, New Zealand thought about this thing, and then a couple weeks later, Australia will be like, oh yeah, now we're starting to do that thing. So I'm like, and I heard New Zealand's a little bit more lush too. So
it is very lush. It's very Jurassic Park, Middle Earth feeling over there. Beautiful. Okay, last question. You ready for this? Before we end it, assuming you're a moviegoer, what's your favorite movie / genre?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm gonna get. This is where the hate mail comes in. I'm like,
oh, I can't wait now.
It's not bad. Oh my gosh. Well, one, I'm definitely a junkie for really, really bad, like boy stupid humor movies. So, Anchorman, Zoolander, Hot Rod. Hot Rod's my jam. If you've never seen Hot Rod, that is my jam. Then there's like then what we're looking at drama. I kind of love The Last Samurai. I don't know if you've ever seen it before.
I haven't seen The Last Samurai. Who's in that?
Oh my gosh. Oh my God. I don't even know. It's like an actor's.
There's an actor in it. I know there's an actor.
Wait. Oh my gosh. I don't know.
No, I haven't seen that. I have to look it up now. Now I have to go see it.
I love the soundtrack. It's amazing. But because I, again, don't really know actor names, a lot of people, I'm pretty sure don't. Tom Cruise! Tom Cruise is the big person.
Oh, that guy. Yeah, I've heard
people
of
are like, boo! Yeah. So, yeah. But I would say I love spending a lot of my time watching really stupid comedy movies.
Good. So no science fiction, no fantasy, no superheroes.
Definitely no superheroes. I can't do.
Not a Marvel fan, huh?
No, I can't. It's just too cheesy sometimes. It's too cheesy.
It's the cheese that makes the flavor.
I do like Batman though. I like the Batman series before we ended up losing our Joker. But right. That was really good. But yeah, no, cool. Definitely not.
All right, so we'll leave it with that. Any parting thoughts you want to share with the audience before we end the interview?
Oh my gosh, I think at the end of the day, I hope that people can just take a step back and think about what does yes look like for them, and I hope that for those who are listening in and are struggling to throw away that list, that hopefully sooner than later, folks can really just narrow in on what's going to make them happy and just dive right into that, and everything else will work out the way it needs to. So perfect.
And I'm guessing if we want to catch up with you, I'll put all the links to your various locations in the notes for this video and on the blog post. But to keep up with you for the Before We Could Drink adventure, it's just leahjudson.com, or is there a specific location for that?
Yeah, no. So Instagram's probably going to be where I live the most. There is a website for it, which is it's the project name. That's same thing for Instagram as well. It's Before We Could Drink. But I'm definitely a lot more present on my personal page, which is There Goes Leah. But all Instagram. Otherwise, if I add on Twitter and whatever you name it, I'll crawl up in a corner and cry. So
no, that's good. Keep it focused.
Yeah, exactly.
This has been a fantastic interview. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for taking time. I know you're exhausted now. You're going to go take a nap.
You're going to take my introvert nap.
Eat a six-pack of hot dogs with some peanut butter on it.
I'll send you photos.
Dude, you better. That's fantastic. All right, Leah. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
This is TWiP.